was a study in 2010, and they looked at organophosphate pesticides, and they found an increased link in ADHD diagnosis. So they looked at over 1,100 children, and again, they did their best to get a representative general population, and 119 children met the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, ultimately at the end of this study. And they found that this study found a 10-fold increase in a specific metabolite, DMAP, that was higher in that population. So why there was a 10-fold increase in the concentration of this metabolite, we're not sure, but we know that metabolite was linked to more directly to the 119 out of the 1,100 that ultimately were diagnosed with ADHD.
Wow.
So it was, again, statistically significant. Back to what I mentioned before, it's just important to understand why children's organs, not just brain, but all of their organs, are not fully developed until later in life. You are potentially adding in chemicals that are affecting a growing, not a finished product organ in this case.
Yeah.
So it's very critical in perinatal development. So what a mother is consuming while she's pregnant and while your children are young. And I think the other thing too, kind of while we're just going at this topic as a whole, is the role of outside. Whenever kids are outside and you have a lawn that has been treated. So the more, make sure that you can give at least a couple days from whenever their spray's done, but be aware of all those things. When you're taking your kids to a park and things like that, and that's where, back to the agricultural workers, it's not going to be that prolonged day to day, but they could get more. I don't have a number for you, but the exposure from, being outside for a few hours on recently treated park lawn versus what maybe they consume over the course of months can be comparable. I don't think that's hard to believe at all. So again, that's just critical things to be aware of as you look at this overall. And with children, back to the kind of the immature organs, the livers and excretory systems they're just not where adults are. So even with similar exposures, or when you have something like these upper limits, which, as we said, can vary, upper limits are uniform. An upper limit for a child would be very different.
Yeah.
Again, immature livers, smaller body weight overall. There's no differentiation made for a young human versus an older human.
Wow. Okay. This is incredibly depressing. I'm very concerned now. I was not before. I thought, I'm eating fruits and vegetables. I'm good to go. Now I'm feeling like I need to eat everything organic. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they can also, pesticides also are endocrine disruptors at the level of obesity and diabetes. So I'm not sure of what the mechanism is, but there are studies that have shown that there is a link to, again, they use the term programming for obesity and diabetes. Also found there's a link to early puberty related to pesticide exposures.
Oh, you said early, it's programming for obesity and diabetes, meaning the exposure to these things is making you more likely to develop these life-altering negative outcomes?
Yes. They say it can lead to damage in central and peripheral tissues and subsequently programming disorders early for later in life. That's the term that's the exact term that they use quoted.
So just going out on a limb here, if I'm understanding you, you're saying that there's a possibility that just the sheer volume of this stuff that's being used is tied to the massive increase we're seeing in the numbers of people with all of these issues, with obesity and diabetes.
So many things we talk about. It's not going to hit for a big headline or for a big hot take.
Right.
But it's one of these multifactorial things, particularly how our society and lives and what we're exposed to has changed so much over the last 50 years. It's one major factor.
Man.
But yeah, you're looking at everything from possibly carcinogenic, then neurological. I read that whole list of neurological issues. In particular, I think what's important is ADHD in kids. Okay, now you're looking at endocrine from a standpoint of not just hormonal, like we talked about, low sperm counts and early puberty, but also blood sugar regulation related to obesity and diabetes. So you're covering a pretty wide swath of potential issues that have been documented, some inconclusively. There's some conflict. There's a huge issue with what levels are we looking at, all those things.
Right.
But again, there's a whole lot of smoke here.
And so many of those things, I mean, like anything that's going to increase obesity is also likely to increase cancer risk and dementia risk and ASCVD risk and all those other things. So it spirals out of control pretty quickly.
And it also makes it harder to unwind that spiral in the sense of what is the cause.
Man.
And so I think ultimately with a lot of these things, there is no exact central cause where there's so many issues. So you're everything from you've been exposed to pesticides to phthalates in plastics and bisphenol A to, what we're breathing in through the air to chemicals and processed foods. So you're adding all of these things together. And yeah, it manifests in ADHD in one child. It manifests in nothing for somebody else. And one adult, it's manifests in Alzheimer's. There's just such a wide range of, and then, and again, it's very hard to, because ideally, I mean, what's the limit to this research? You can't have a study where you say, okay, we're going to give 100 of you over limit pesticide diets.
Yep.
And we're going to give another 100 of you pesticide free. And we're going to compare you 20 years from now. That's ideally what you would do.
Right.
That's what you do with animals.
Yes.
That provides some clue as to what's going on. But when you start trying to correct it for levels and things like that, let alone the metabolic differences, let alone all the factors that we talk about, it's very difficult.
Yeah. And even if I'm trying to eat organic food in my own life, or my kids, they go to school and they eat a school lunch.
Sure.
And who knows whether that's organic, or they go to sports and some mom brings fruit for everybody and who knows what's in that. Or maybe you stop at a restaurant and you get a salad and it's a nice sit down restaurant and it's a nice salad, but who knows? Who knows if the person cleaned it properly, if it was organic to begin with. So there's no way to do that study, and there's really no way to even properly fully eliminate it from our own diets, even if we really wanted to.
Yeah. And I think too, that maybe something I was going to touch on later, but I think that's a great way to sum it up. You don't have to worry about that one soccer game. You don't have to worry about that one, you go out to eat 3 times a week or whatever. To me, the issue is what can you control within a realistic framework of your life? And I know for me, not everybody can buy organic. I don't buy organic from top to bottom. I do eat out. My kids do. I allow them to have the treat after their baseball game. But what I can control a little more easily is the fruit in my house. Sure. Those kind of things. I can make that decision and know that I'm limiting exposures. We're talking about chronic exposures. We're talking about the levels. That then you can eliminate a huge percentage of that, because for every 2 times you eat out, between the fruits and vegetables and like we've talked about meat and different things in the house, if you have that a little more under control, at least under your own roof, you're going to make a bigger difference than, you cannot eat, if it's not labeled organic, you cannot have that snack after baseball. It's going to drive you crazy.
Yeah.